Last season, Arsenal assets were an absolute must as they were pretty much underpriced and to a certain extent, they overperformed. Got a friend with me to discuss Arsenal assets for this season and let's find out what he has to say. Right, guys, welcome back. This is the Above Average FPL podcast. My name is Adam, and today we're going to be looking at Arsenal assets. So Baker has taken the day off. I've got with me a friend of mine, right? So he is one half of, what are you one half of? I've forgotten already.
A few things. The Arsenal Bitesize Pod.
That's the
obviously.
one. That's the one that I forgot immediately. Yeah. You are one half of the Arsenal Bitesize Podcast. You're 1/3 of Net That Haul, and you are a pillar in the FPL community, bringing us things like FPL meets. FPLNima, how you doing, mate? You right?
Yeah, I'm good. It's nice to be here with you recording. Really excited to talk about Arsenal. I can see that Baker's done a runner on us today, but no offense taken, Baker.
I absolutely butchered that intro. I'm really, really sorry about that. But no, you're right. We're here. We're finally here. We're set up. We're good. And Baker's away on holiday. And so I didn't want to be outnumbered. So Clayton, it wasn't anything personal, but I didn't want to be outnumbered. It is our podcast. This is a Tottenham podcast ordinarily. So only one Arsenal fan at a time, unfortunately, when there's only one of us. So
totally fair. But yeah, no, I'm really excited to go through this. I know you're going to talk through some nice stuff from last season, look at this season, maybe how the signings impact the team, and just generally think about, do we start with 3 Arsenal assets this year? If so, which ones? And I'm really excited to get into that discussion with you today.
Nice one, mate. Nice one, mate. Well, we thought we'd choose just now to chat because Arsenal have just played their friendly against the MLS All-Stars. Obviously went very well, 5-0, and relatively good performance from Arsenal. Bit surprising to some extent for me because I thought with it being mid-season for the guys in the MLS that they'd be match fit and ready, whereas I did maybe expected Arsenal to be a bit slow out the blocks, but it didn't seem that way. Did you watch the game?
Yeah, so I kind of had a 3-hour nap, woke up at 1:30 to watch it, and then slept another 3 hours afterwards to make sure I had something of value to add. Also, it was the first chance to see the new signings, Rice's debut, seeing them play out. They didn't really get to play in Germany last week. So it was only our second preseason game. I'd say the fitness was definitely lacking. We weren't as clinical, perhaps. The pitch conditions seemed a bit poor, if I'm honest. I think some of the college athletes play on better pitches, so that's a bit of a weird one. And the heat was definitely intense. Obviously, it's their mid-season in MLS, as you say. I think the problem for them, and Wayne Rooney summed it up perfectly, they asked him in an interview, what did you learn as a manager from this match? And he said, absolutely nothing, and just laughed. And I think that's totally fair because the players arrived on Monday. He obviously hand-selected the best players in the MLS right now, but he didn't really get a chance to kind of coach them together or play them together. And they were making massive changes. Like he was doing 6 subs at a time, like every 10 minutes. So I think to be fair to them, this was a commercial opportunity to show off the MLS, to work with Apple TV and to see where the world of broadcaster rights go. And obviously there was lots of questions about Messi going to Inter Miami and his debut in a couple of days. So yeah, I think it was just a big exhibition match, but we learned a lot about what we might expect to see from Arsenal and how they shape up this season.
Cool. Well, let's look at last season because I mentioned already that right at the start that Arsenal assets were underpriced last year significantly, and we're looking at 4 assets here that huge. I would say huge performances. Obviously, Jesus had an extended period of injury, but definitely started quickly. Thinking back to that Leicester game, 17 or 19 points in game week 2 last year, and yeah, these are the 4 sort of focal assets. Saka, 202 points. Odegaard, 212. Martinelli, 198. And Saka was like 6.5. No, Saka was 8, wasn't he? Odegaard was 6.5. And Martinelli was 6 million last year.
Yeah, he started at 6 million, yeah.
It's That's just crazy. Bonkers to think. I mean, look, I get it. I mean, I got it last year. I understood why the pricing went down the way it did. And, the United players were priced in a similar fashion. And we've seen that. We've seen teams in 7th, 8th, etc. being priced in that way, and to some extent we see a little bit of that this season, where teams like Tottenham and not Kane, but Tottenham and Chelsea have been priced slightly lower, but they've brought the United and Arsenal players back in line. But I did listen. I did have a listen to your podcast with Clayton, the Arsenal Bitesize Podcast, as you mentioned, and your little post-season review. And you mentioned it was like a 9 out of 10 season for the Premier League in terms of your expectations. I mean, just remind us what really were your expectations for last year?
So we did a preseason pod last summer, and I'd said that if we can get top four and like go far in the Europa League, or maybe win the Europa League, but basically qualify for Champions League. So it was like if we miss out top four but win Europa, that's still a success. So, in my mind, especially seeing the pundits' predictions, no one even had us in for top four. I was already quite disappointed about finishing fifth, obviously, to you guys the season before. And I was happy with the new additions of Jesus and Zinchenko, but I wasn't sure at that time that like second was even something we could fathom. Like, I think in my mind, third was the ceiling. And, with the window you boys had last summer, I kind of thought you were the shoe in for third. So it was really like, I honestly thought fourth at best. I didn't expect Liverpool to have the season they had. I didn't think Chelsea would go the way they did. So there's obviously some mitigating circumstances with other squads perhaps not quite performing. But, before William Saliba's injury, for the last couple of months, it felt like we were on pace for like a 96-point season or something. And really, it totally fell apart after his injury. But yeah, so for me, I think the reason I say it was a 9 out of 10 was more just from a fan going to the stadium perspective. I don't remember just enjoying watching matches that much in a very long time. I think there's certain Gooners who said, they were there when the Invincibles played and the energy was as good as then, if not better. Even the football we played, like, it was just phenomenal. We were blowing away teams for the start of the season. Yes, we had easier fixtures, of course. But yeah, I don't know. It was nothing like what I was expecting, hence the 9 out of 10. But I think in the pod, we also said that when you take the season as a whole, right, including kind of the other cups we were in, it was maybe a 7.5 out of 10, because we really did throw those other competitions and it didn't quite pay off to go the full way in the Premier League either. So as a season as a whole, I think it was a bit more disappointing.
Okay, small technical problem there, but we're back. And yeah, Nima, you were saying, so I've left the audio in there. I haven't edited it out. Your face is like frozen, but so people will just have to deal with that. But no, we're back and fully mobile now, so we're all good. So yeah, so like a 9 out of 10 for the Premier League, 7.5 out of 10. I mean, I'm assuming you had Arsenal assets pretty much all season, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I started the season last year with, I think, Gabriel, Jesus, and Martinelli. And then for most of the season, I had them. I made the mistake that many did of selling performing assets just because there was other players with double game weeks, for example, towards the end. And they carried on, those midfielders carried on returning, as we saw. So, that was a bit of a mistake from me. But yeah, overall, I think I always had some Arsenal assets. Like, I was constantly moving between them. And, there was the Odegaard to Martinelli back to Odegaard. Like, lots of people made these moves. And I think this season, I'm going to maybe try to stick to one for longer, like just pick one for the season and not keep jumping around and miss the hauls.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, in order to do that, we're going to have a quick look at pricing and see how they've now been sort of jacked up. And, we've got 8 players on the screen. There's been lots of conversation around this already on content and stuff like that, but it's important just to go through these players, I think, and understand, are they viable picks, etc., in the context of other picks from other teams, obviously, and what we expect from Arsenal this season, because fixtures wise, it's a really, really strong start, really, isn't it? So we've got basically on screen, I've got Ramsdale 5 million, 143 points last year, Ben White 5.5, 156 points, Gabriel 5 million, 146 points, and then Saliba obviously was injured for quite a period last season. 5 million, 117 points. Any of these guys, are you interested at all in the defensive line?
Yeah, so I'm currently on Gabriel at 5 million. The reason I like him specifically, actually, is because I think in our first kind of 6 or 7 matches, we faced like 6 of the teams who were bottom for XG conceded from set pieces. And Gabriel, as we saw, like not just last year, it's like, been a recurring theme for the 3 years. He's been there scoring goals every season. I think he actually underperformed his XG last season. I think he got 3 goals from like close to a 5 XG. So with Gabriel, I do think it's sustainable. Yesterday in the MLS game as well, he got on the end of a set piece and he looked really frustrated with himself that he didn't get it on target. So I do think that, against those opponents, Gabriel is someone I would rather have than Ramsdale.
Yeah,
as it stands. That's kind of the way I'm looking at it. But Ramsdale is one of the highest owned goalkeepers in FPL right now in preseason. So it's
that's mad.
interesting.
That's mad. I don't want to correct you or anything, but Gabriel got 5 goals from 5.09 xG, so basically bang on. But that's still good.
Oh, did he
That's,
get? Maybe he got goals in other competitions because I think he only
uh,
got 3 Premier League goals.
oh no, I'm looking at the wrong.
Okay, I was
I'm
gonna
looking at the wrong thing.
say.
3 goals, 5 xG. No, you're right. You're right. You're
Okay,
right.
I was gonna say, like, where did I get that from?
I've no idea. I'm definitely looking in the wrong column for some reason in my stats table. Yes, sorry. 3 goals, 5 xG. No, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. Yeah. So, always a threat, as you say, from set pieces, and that's going to be, that's going to be important in the early part of the season when defenses are still trying to work out how to defend properly. I mean, if you want pre-season evidence of that, just go and watch the Tottenham friendly, who and so yeah, hopefully we don't face you until like game week 8, I don't think, or something like that. So
We've got some time, yeah,
we've got some
before
time to
the
figure
big
that
day.
out. So it's just Gabriel for you. I mean, I agree now. I agree that like Ben White is obviously overpriced and completely a dead asset for me. I think even with his attacking potential, I just think it's not going to be worth it.
I think he's a tough one, yeah, Ben White, because I reckon that let's say he hauls in game week 1, I would not be surprised to suddenly see the masses transferring him in. So
Don't
he's one
worry.
of those picks where, like, I just think that 500,000 I can do more with elsewhere.
Yeah.
Like maybe it gives me a 5 million goalkeeper instead of a 4.5 million goalkeeper to start the season with.
Yeah.
But with Ben White, there is also the risk, obviously, with Timber, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later. But I do think that people felt he was lucky to get his attacking returns last season, and a lot went to Gabriel from White for the goal threat, and then White kept getting attacking returns. And in hindsight, I do think White's kind of attacking returns were sustainable. He was starting to overlap more with Saka. He was getting into the final third more. He was cutting back to Saka. I think White cut back to Partey against you guys in the North London derby at the Emirates. But as the season went on, obviously it was the first time he'd played right back for Arsenal that season, and I think he got more into kind of the chemistry with Saka and used to overlapping. So I would not be surprised if he turns out to be a good pick, but with the whole Timber signing at the moment, paying extra 500,000 for that risk just seems a bit much to me.
Fair enough. And so let's move on to the attackers, and we're going to look like at the attackers as they stand at the moment. Obviously, they're impacted by transfers that have been made, and that's not necessarily that we want to pick Havertz or we want to pick Rice, but those players could impact how useful these guys are, and it also could impact minutes potentially. I can't see it overly impacting minutes, but it could do, especially seeing as you've got so many more competitions that you're going to want to be firing on this season. So 8.5 million for Saka and for Odegaard, 8 million for Martinelli, and 8 million for Jesus. Do you think they've got it right this season?
Yeah, I think I'm surprised Odegaard's the same price as Saka. I know he got more points than him last season. Having watched that game yesterday, I think I mentioned to you that I have a feeling that Odegaard might play a bit deeper, but that didn't stop him getting a wonderful assist yesterday for Martinelli. But for me, at that price point, like, I wouldn't be starting the season with Odegaard personally ahead of Saka. And Saka just continued as he left off. He got MVP in the match yesterday, only played a half, got 1 real assist and 1 fantasy assist, essentially. He's just carrying on as he went off. The season ended. He went and got his first career hat trick for England. Like, I forget he's 21. Like, I don't understand the decision making he has at that age. So for me, he's the most exciting pick. If you subscribe to talisman theory, etc., he is Arsenal's talisman. So Saka at 8.5, I think that is underpriced. I think he could have been 9.5 and still been worth it. So last season, there was a stat where I think every goal that he scored or assisted was like the equalizing goal or the goal to put Arsenal ahead. So he's the one who was relied on to like grab the game by the scruff of the neck and take all the responsibility.
That's really important. I mean that's important. I mean, it's surprising in some ways that that's not completely reflected in his bonus, because obviously Odegaard. I mean, the reason why Odegaard outscored Saka is pretty much bonus, right? So Odegaard had 17 bonus points last season. Saka only 7. So it's strange that's how that's played out. I mean, one thing I'm in agreement. I think Saka could have. I mean, I was saying to Baker when we were talking about the prices that I thought Saka could be 10.5, and I just think that I did think like talismanic with penalties, etc., etc. I mean, he only had 2 penalties last season. At the same time, I mean, the returns were spread. Returns were really spread across the team. So, Saka had 25 returns, 25 goal involvements. Odegaard had 22, Martinelli 20, and Jesus 17. But Jesus's came in 2,000 minutes, and the other boys had, well, Martinelli 2,800, Odegaard 3,100, Saka almost 3,200 minutes. So, Jesus for me looks like a pretty decent pick here, and I still think that maybe Saka probably could have been priced a little bit higher, personally.
I think Jesus is fair pricing wise. There is a lot of competition for that spot now. We know Trossard can play there as a false 9. Havertz could play there as a false 9. Smith Rowe could play there. Martinelli could play there. Eddie and Balogun if he stays. Like, I do think that with the multiple competitions, as you say, we're going to see Pep levels of rotation with this team. But we'll discuss that when we look at my predicted lineup for game week 1 a bit more. I'm currently on Jesus and Saka with Gabriel in defense. Martinelli keeps kind of calling out to me, though. And the reason I hadn't tinkered him yet is because he picked up the injury at the end of last season, obviously. And when we went to Germany last week, he flew with the boys, he trained with them, but he wasn't in the squad. So they were just kind of making sure he's okay. But yesterday he came on as a sub. He got a wonderful goal. And, whenever Martinelli gets the ball, he will drive forward. It's just that pace is scary. And it's not the normal Brazilian type of dribbling. It's not that flair dribbling that you see. It's very much just pure physical attributes and pace and strength. Like it's very linear, run past everyone. No one can get you.
which was an R9 trait, really, wasn't it? It was a Ronaldo trait. He didn't do the left, rights, up and down. He was very much like straight towards the target and just knock people. He was more knock people over as you go. Very good with his feet, obviously, but I can maybe see that comparison.
It's interesting you say that. You're in good company. No, you're in good company though, because I think it was Ronaldinho who actually a few years ago said that Martinelli could be like the next like Ronaldo for the Brazil team, basically. So you've got some good scouting eyes on you, despite having to say it through gritted teeth. I know.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Cool. Let's move on. Let's move on because I think pricing. I think we all agree. I think that pricing's okay, and relative to the to the players around them, this is kind of like the benchmark, right? So
I think it's fair. I think just one player to add
above Saka. I mean, just quickly above Saka is like KDB and Salah, right? That's it.
Yeah, I think KDB, Salah, Son, and Rashford.
Okay, fine.
There's like 3 midfielders ahead of him, or 4 midfielders ahead of him.
And Jesus is the 3rd highest priced forward in the game. Like it's mad. That's just the way the pricing has been. Sorry, you were going to say something.
Yeah, so the only thing was just in terms of the midfield, obviously Havertz at 7.5 million. I don't think he's a starter for the season, but he is a one to keep an eye on. A lot of us who will start with Jesus are maybe just using that as a placeholder from a kind of structure point of view to then see whether someone like an Nkunku is good value or other cheaper strikers. And we might then move. And when I do that, let's say in Game Week 3, do I really want to only have 2 Arsenal going forward? Probably not. So if I then have like a 6.5 to 7.5 mid, if I've punted on a Foden, a Maddison, someone like that, and it's not quite worked out, even Mbuemo, Mitoma, maybe that Jesus downgrade means I can then look at, do I get a Martinelli? Do I get a Havertz? Do I get an Odegaard? Like, do I get a second Arsenal mid a few weeks in? So I probably won't start with a Havertz or a Martinelli, but they're kind of something I want to watch and see how they evolve the way we play. And then maybe 7.5 could be a steal. Just on that note, if he plays the Xhaka role, Xhaka got 7 goals and 7 assists last season.
Yeah.
And he's not as good in the final third as Havertz is. Bruno Fernandes last season, for context, got 7 goals and 8 assists.
You're desperate to put that stat in. I love that.
I have to because, he's the best player in the world. But yeah, anyway, so yeah, he only got 1 more goal returned than Granit Xhaka, finished Granit Xhaka.
Yeah. Moving on. I love that. Moving on. This is the part that I'm going to enjoy the most because the question really is it sustainable? And that's probably the macro question. The question that I'm kind of asking is, were you actually as good as you said you were, as you thought you were? Were you as good actually as you finished? And I think it's important just looking at some fantasy data as well as some expected data and the minutes that were played as well, just for context. I think something that sticks out here straight away is that is that Jesus' non-penalty XGI. So sorry for people that are listening. So I've got a table with kind of the top 9 players we're looking at in Arsenal from that were there last season. They've got their minutes played, their non-pen XGI, the delta. I haven't got the actual goal involvements, but you can work it out from the delta, and then FPL points on the end. And so the interesting thing here, Jesus in only 2,055 minutes put up almost 16 non-pen XGI and basically was bang on his money for that, scoring 125 points. And then you look across the rest of the attackers, and every single one of them has overperformed significantly. And I went and had a look, and I, in trying to set up for this, I had to restart my computer a couple of times, so I haven't got it up on screen, but I went and had a look at FB Ref for Ødegaard and Saka in particular. And Ødegaard just seems to be on this, this constant upward trajectory, right? 17.7 non-pen XGI. He had a delta of 4.26, so that's quick maths, 22 returns, and that's been improved every season that he's been at Arsenal. So it started off basically he was level, then he was about 2 ahead last year, the year before, and then like 4.5, almost, or 4.26 this year. Saka, he was 8 above his non-pen XGI. That's mad. That's really, and that's non-pen, so it doesn't include the 2 penalties that he scored, where that's basically half an XG that over performance for scoring both of those. Like, so I guess my question is, like, listening back to your podcast, Clayton and in particular, and yourself, I think to some extent, pretty bullish on this being a sustainable model with lots of young players. Is it sustainable though, or is this just overperformance? And do we expect some kind of regression? And does the pricing then, become more of an issue?
Yeah, it's almost like, are we going to go from a scenario where last year they were underpriced and overperformed, whereas this year could they end up being overpriced and underperform, especially with the Champions League nights and the rotation and the new signings? So I think just the kind of sustainability is the main topic, obviously, to answer that first. I do think maybe I'm less bullish than Clayton. I would not be shocked if we were set for like a 78-point season. So obviously a drop off from how we did last year. And a big part of that for me is just, I don't think we're going to be throwing the competitions, whether it was intentional or otherwise, this season. And I think we have just a lot more of a squad. So to give you the context, this is where I do think maybe it is sustainable. So I do think obviously we won't necessarily get as many points as we did, because I do think we did overperform. I agree with that. But in terms of where it might be sustainable, what's materially changed from last year is the depth and the quality of the depth. So kind of floor raisers, if you like. So last year, obviously, when Saliba got injured, Tomiyasu got injured with him, which then meant we couldn't like have Tomiyasu at right back as a plan B and Ben White at centre back. We went all the way to plan C. That wasn't ideal. We also had no one on the right-hand side who could do what Zinchenko could do on the left-hand side, which kind of made Tierney a dead asset, essentially. But he's a Champions League level fullback, but just in the right system. With the way our backline looks now, and with the outgoings and the incomings, I feel like we've added versatile depth in that same kind of young age profile all across the pitch. And I do think there's maybe one more signing or 2 more to come with outgoings. So last year, I think what I told you was that I felt we only had a plan A, and that's where I don't think it's sustainable, because teams will figure you out. You can blow them away for a while, but we got to the point where, every single opposition team was doubling up on our wingers. Like Saka was just always with 2-3 man on him. And every game, like when we played Newcastle at home, I think last January, like it was 0-0, I believe. And like, he was just basically like marked out the game. And there's only so much you can do when you got 3 guys on you for 90 minutes, no matter who you are. Now, I think going forwards, there's going to be less predictability from this Arsenal team. And that's where that kind of pep level of rotation comes in. I think where sustainability comes in. I think what you'll see is, rather than a plan A that works and everything else falls apart after that, there's going to be different plans for different teams. So where you play like a top 6 traditional opponent, you might see like a double pivot. I think we spoke about like a Declan Rice and Partey. Where we play like a weaker opponent, you might see a single pivot with, Partey or even Rice, and then ahead of them 2 more attacking mids like Havertz and Odegaard. So I just think that kind of flexibility is going to be game changing for us. And that's where I think it is more sustainable. But then where the knock comes in points that I gave at the start is with the additional rotation from the UCL. And just from an assets point of view, We saw last year, like John Stones was great for City, their best defender and phenomenal in this new role. But towards the end of the season, loads of people bought him and got, essentially done by that because he just played Champions League. Like he essentially just stopped playing in the Premier League. And I think we might start to see more like that from Arsenal, and therefore the Arsenal assets, they might start to become the type that cameo on and get 1-pointers, and it will be more akin to what you see from City. I think like you just don't know who's going to start after some time.
Yeah, no, okay, that's fair enough. I mean, I think from the start, I think Arteta's going to want to get a bedded in 11 that he can trust, and I think he's going to want to get some momentum built up. And I hadn't shown you this, but I'd already put together sort of fixtures, and this is a snippet from just Lego Mane's hop on, hop off graphic that he did, and this start is insanely good. Like, and your home games. And your two tough games are home games, right? In this context. So Forest at home, Palace away, Fulham at home. And then you've got United at home in game week 4, away at Everton, Tottenham at home in game week 6, away to Bournemouth in game week 7. And I've kind of stopped there because we're all kind of just going to wild card by then primarily. But I just feel like this is all going to be pre-Europe as well. If you think game week 1 to game week 5 pretty much is all pre-Europe. So, one game a week, you're going to probably throw the Carabao. I'd imagine there'd be fringe players. I mean, you'll start with Nketiah.
I'd expect maybe 5-6
Havertz
changes. Yeah, minimum 5-6 changes.
Timber and all this sort of stuff in the beginning. And yeah, I think just akin to last season, you probably end up just going out and hitting it as hard as possible for the first 5 weeks, which means I think we could continue to see overperformance in the first 5 weeks in particular. So I just think that's relevant for game.
That first game alone, it's something that tempts me into like triple attack and just forget the defender to start the season. Like it's that kind of fixture. Like, last year, Jesus was the highest owned player going into game week 1. And this season, he's not anywhere near as closely owned.
And he's the same price.
And it's the exact same price.
Exactly the same price.
And we know so much more about what his role is in this team. We had no idea before, right? So I do think people are nervous on him because they think he underperforms. So we talked about most of the assets overperforming. Jesus is one that people see as a massive serial underperformer over like 5 years. And that perception, I don't think changes. I think people also don't accept that people can change, that players can get better. Like he's not that old, right? Like he's just starting to enter his prime. Like
he's still a poor finisher. I think because XGI, I think XGI here. I think there's the way he plays. Obviously, is more. It's very much more like a false 9 than a true 9. And if I try to make two comparisons to other teams in recent times, I'm thinking Haaland for City last year, true number 9, pillar of the attack. And then I go back to like 1920 or 1819 Liverpool, where you've got Mane and Salah alongside Firmino, who would drop in and be that sort of busybody that would run around. And already, actually, in the two friendlies that we've seen, like Jesus has had that kind of heat map that has shown him, not necessarily being the one in the box. That's really coming from Martinelli more than anything. To be fair, Saka's staying quite wide, and Jesus is kind of just doing the everything role. Look, he's a very good footballer, right? And this is why he did work with Pep when he was at City, because he's very good on the ball, and he's good at making things happen with the players around him in tight spaces, etc., etc. And I mentioned that at the start of last season. I just think continuing that kind of role is going to be more towards assists. That doesn't really help for bonus for a striker and stuff like that. So I'm still not convinced of Jesus at 8 million personally. I think you better off. I mean,
would you maybe go for the second mid? Like, because that's one of the thoughts I've got.
I'm on 3, so I'm on 2 mids. I'm on Ødegaard and Saka and Gabriel right now.
Okay,
and that's kind of where I'm leaning, because I think, as you said, like having Ødegaard and Saka means I can move down to whoever I want, and then it's not too far a jump if I want to get up to a Son or I've already got Rashford. If I want to get to Son, for example, if Tottenham start well, then it probably won't be an Arsenal player given those fixtures at the start, but I just wanted that extra money in midfield there. So that's why I've kind of set up in that way so far. But
I think you're spot on with Jesus just on that note, because I do think he's kind of everywhere. And one of the things I've kind of, I guess a theory I've prescribed to is that if he was just sitting in the box waiting for the ball, I don't think we'd see as much underperformance. I don't think it's just his finishing. I think there are such fine margins at this level of the sport. And just that 1-2% in his mind that's like almost mentally exhausted from being everywhere and dropping deep and providing for everyone. Like when he then suddenly does get the ball in the box, I think sometimes he's just not 100% of his intent and view and focus is on like, I'm going to stay here, I'm going to score. He's got to do everything. But then that's better for Martinelli and Saka because
I was just going to show you that. I can't put it on screen for everyone, but if you can see that, can you just see all the yellow spots there? That's Jesus today, I think. Let's see if that zooms. I don't even know if that's going to zoom, but you can probably see the color change there. You know, that's terrible. That might be.
I see a white screen, but I think that might just be me.
It might just be you, but maybe people can see the yellow there. That's Jesus from today against the MLS All Stars. Yeah, it's all a bit sort of all over the place and stuff. So
I think he's not a long-term pick for me. So what I would say is that he would be a short-term fling if I do start with him. Like I'd definitely be looking to move on to an Nkunku or other striker like Ferguson if he's nailed. Like, yeah, that's somewhere where I could see myself moving within a few weeks. But yeah, I think I don't know, like kind of he's the second or third most expensive striker, as you said. And
yeah,
it just seems like a kind of structure decision right now. I think I would rather have the second Arsenal mid in reality.
Let's have a quick chat, just very briefly, just on the guys that you have brought in. So I think we've already mentioned these, to be honest, but just to cover again, obviously Declan Rice coming injury and Timber from Ajax and Havertz from Chelsea. I don't think any of these guys are going to be fantasy options for us. I can't see myself wanting to even get Havertz. I didn't want to consider Xhaka at 5.5 or whatever he was last year. I just don't see it when you've still got Martinelli, Odegaard, Saka as options outside of that position. Timber, we don't know, and Declan Rice, same deal really. But in terms of improving and enabling other assets, or just generally at Arsenal players, like what's your take on these guys coming in?
So I think the most telling thing was when Declan came on the pitch, he just kind of looked in shock the entire time he played yesterday. It's like he'd never seen like his team keep the ball. Like he was like, oh right, you guys don't need me to do everything. Like he was almost like, can you give me the ball more, please? He was like looking for it, and he was like, guys, like please give me the ball. I want to dribble past people. Like what the hell? Like I'm just chilling. Like like I'm playing in a team that plays attacking football with possession. So I honestly think he is going to be like game-changing signing for us. I think he will be here 5 to 10 years and like could be the future captain. So in terms of what that enables, I think he has been in Arteta's plans since like even January. And apparently we tried for him, but West Ham weren't willing when they were trying to survive relegation, which is where we shifted to Caicedo. And as soon as that window ended, we then reverted back to speaking to Declan and his team from February onwards. So he was like the key cornerstone of this summer, from what I've heard. And had we not got him, there was like no other plan. There's like no other player like him. So I think what he adds is just assurance, technical security. He's a dual monster who can cover like 40 yards. Like his attributes are key to this team and the way we play and the fluid system. Like I think we've said it before to you, where I don't feel we have actual positions. We have like zones and people operate in triangles and zones, and it's a lot of kind of just switching positions, which is why Jesus will kind of move out to the left. Martinelli comes into the middle. Like I think last season when we struggled to break down teams, sometimes we didn't have someone who could help us break them down. I think that's where Declan can help us against a deep block as well. So I think overall, I'm expecting a big change with him. The question is, will he play as a left 8? Because we say he's a non-option, but at his price point, I think it's like 5 million or something. If he was actually the one who is playing the 8 and not the 6, because Partey seems to be staying, that could be quite interesting at 5 million if he's actually getting a lot of returns, because I do think he has it in him. Like he's scored some screamers in his career, and he's not someone who is shy from scoring. Yes, he didn't score much at West Ham, but I think that could be one to keep an eye on. I'd just keep an eye on him. Havertz, I think yesterday Trossard played in the left 8 role to start the game, and he did kind of what Xhaka would do normally. And he looked very good. He looked Santi Cazorla-esque in a way. So, he scored a banger of a goal as well, Trossard, audacious shot. Yeah. I would not be surprised if you see more of Trossard playing in the left 8 potentially this season. So what does that mean for like Havertz? Where does Havertz play finally? And I think he was almost playing like behind the striker. So when Balogun was on, he was like a shadow of him, like a shadow striker, like a Leverkusen. So again, that's one to watch. I don't know how he's going to pick his 11, as you say, for those first parts of the season where it's just one game a week. Timber, just to add on him, I don't know if what his price is in FPL, if he's been added yet, but he's one to keep an eye out on. I think primarily he will play right back and be inverted and do what Zinchenko did. And, Zinchenko missed, I think, 17 games through injury last season. He missed a lot of games at City as well through injury. He's key to how we play in that kind of inverted role. But Timber looked really good. I think what I told you is he gave me kind of vibes of Saliba last preseason, where no one thought Saliba would start. They thought White and Gabriel were a secure partnership. And then Saliba just did too much in preseason to not be a starter. And yesterday, I think MLS, the level was a bit below. So we didn't get to see Timber having to defend much. So I do still want to see how he does against United on this weekend. I think we play Barcelona, we play City. Let's keep an eye on him. But if he carries on the preseason like he is now, I don't see how Timber doesn't start in this team. He was honestly unreal. I don't know what to say. It was just so essentially the conclusion is having kind of him, having Rice, having these technicians, Odegaard, having Zinchenko, Saliba's a technician, Havertz is technically gifted, Saka's gifted, Jesus is technically gifted. I think we're going to retain possession a lot more and a lot more 1-2 football, quick changes of movement and switching wings when you can't get into the box. I think we're just going to be better against deep blocks is essentially the conclusion. And there's a lot to unfold. I think let's see how we are before game week 1 and what that settled 11 looks like. Obviously, I've given you a predicted 11 now, and I've actually not included Havertz in it, right? Which is a bit of that's a bit of an outrageous one, isn't it?
Let's go there. Let's have a look at this, because I had you'll see here, this is the worst ever Photoshop of Declan Rice onto Ben White's body you'll ever see. But you've got Ramsdale in goal, White, Saliba, Gabriel and Zinchenko. You've got Partey in the 6, Odegaard and Rice in the 8s, Saka, Martinelli, Jesus. It's pretty standard from last year, obviously just replacing Xhaka with Declan Rice. I was trying to sort of embellish this graphic, and I was trying to see this is kind of how you would set up in a Sky Sports formations type graphic. How would you look in possession? How would you look out of possession? How do you look in attack? I tried to see how this would look in attack when you sort of invert Zinchenko and you place Ben White further up the pitch, and I was trying to work out who actually is the forward man. Is there a central striker, or is there, with Jesus kind of dropping off, Martinelli comes inside? Is Odegaard the late man that comes alongside him? Does it push, because it's going to push Saka inside, and where does Rice sit? It felt really confusing, this lineup, for me personally. As a Tottenham fan who doesn't really know Arsenal that well, to be honest, it confused me how this was kind of set up. I don't know. Maybe you can talk me through your thoughts, how this would work.
Through it a bit. So obviously, I think on paper that's kind of the lineup, but I think what you probably see is this kind of 3-2-4-1, with a midfield box, and then at the base of it, primarily in the lineup I've put there, it would be kind of Zinchenko and Partey. So you'd have kind of White, Saliba, Gabriel, and then you have Zinchenko and Partey as the 2 in the 3-2-4-1. And then the 4 is kind of Martinelli and Saka on the wings, with Odegaard and Rice or Havertz or Trossard, whoever, as the 2 middle midfielders in the 4 box. So you've got that's where it's difficult. It's what then happens? Could it sometimes be the other way? Could it be that Rice is at the base of the box shape in the midfield, and actually it's Havertz and Odegaard up top? Is it that Jorginho can come in? Because we've not even mentioned him. And Arteta was in an interview and he said, I've got 3 number 6s. And he was I'm going to have to find a way to use them all. So what does that mean? Does that mean that at least 2 of those 3 will always play? 2 of Partey and Rice, or Jorginho? Is there games where Jorginho is used and actually Partey's rested, so it's Jorginho and Rice? Does that then mean Timber is the one in that 2 in the 3-2-4-1? Obviously, in all of this, Jesus is the 1. Just to clarify, I realized I didn't mention who the 1 was. But that midfield box, I think that's the crux of what do we expect from Arsenal? Because the defenders, the fullback we choose, whether it's Zinchenko or Timber, the kind of the 8s we play with, the forward that we play with, I think that will all be determined by who's at the base of this box in the midfield and who's at the front of the box in the more creative roles. And I think that's something we're going to see more of. Obviously, I think Pep kind of plays similar system as well with the box at times. And I think there's Zerbi as well in his build-up. So I think in build-up, that's what I'm expecting. this is actually quite a funny one because obviously people are saying, he's copied Arteta, has copied Pep, right? And I was speaking to Bobby, and we spoke about how actually in Mikel's first ever game, he played this exact 3-2-4-1, but it had like Socrates, Mustafi, and Bellerin in defense. And yeah, I think soon he realized he needs to play a back five and be pragmatic and try to win the cup playing very pragmatically. And it's taken a lot of churn and takeover of the squad to get to a system that has the players he actually wants.
Yeah, I mean it makes sense. I mean, look, you earn your tutelage under Pep Guardiola. You're going to have very similar belief system to him. I mean, not really a shock, is it? And
I think they both come from the Cruyff time as well, right? Yeah. So I think Pep obviously credits Cruyff and Total Football, and then he evolved it, and then Arteta obviously follows them. He's a disciple of them as well. They're all La Masia guys.
Yeah, exactly. So it all comes from somewhere. I mean, that's great, mate. To be honest, I really appreciate you going through this for us. I think the final thing I just wanted to ask you, just more on a fantasy.
Actually, sorry, can I add one thing just on that left centre mid? Because I think
let's go back.
Yeah, so I think the left centre mid is like, that's where the hard question is. Is it Rice? Is it Trossard? Is it Havertz? Like, what is it? And I think this season Arteta's gonna redefine that left centre mid to actually optimize for final third actions. Whereas last season, Xhaka did have some defensive duties. I think whoever plays that left centre mid role won't be expected to do that. So it'll be reduced build-up duties, and it will be all about movement between the lines. So whoever does ultimately end up playing there, whether that's Rice or Havertz or Trossard, if they're nailed and they're playing there, I do think they're going to be the last runner into the box, because you mentioned Odegaard. And I think last season, Odegaard got a lot of his goals being that last runner. But actually, I think Odegaard will play deeper, and it will be whoever's in that left centre mid or who will play further forward. That's just, so Odegaard will essentially sit deeper and slot into the pivot when we're out of possession is kind of my take on this.
Is that would that not depend on who that pivot is? Because I mean, if it's Rice, it makes more sense in my mind for Odegaard to be the one to push on. If it's a Havertz, then yes, you could probably switch that up, and Odegaard then sits in to be that sort of playmaking six.
Yeah, so it's who's the other.
So you can come out when it when it comes out, and you look to recycle, or if it gets cleared or something like that, you've got a player in possession that can distribute the ball quickly. Like Odegaard can. I mean, yeah, there's multiple ways that. That you can do this, and it really annoys me that you're set up in this way, to be quite honest, as a Tottenham fan. I mean, you're talking about Declan Rice. I think he's one of the best in his position in the world at the moment. I mean, maybe that's England bias or whatever, but genuinely, there's not many players that can do what he does. I think that you're going to press pretty hard with this team as well. I mean, Gabriel Jesus. I say Gabriel, it could be any one of them. Jesus works his nuts off up the top there. Martinelli obviously works hard, and Saka. I mean, these guys are young, they run. You're going to win the ball high up quite often as well. So, yeah, it all leads to a fast start for me.
I think you're right. I think ball recovery and retention is going to be like incredible to watch this season. Yeah. I think we're going to see some wild retention and ball recoveries.
Yeah. So just to finish off then, I mean, let's bring it back to FPL. I mean, for the first 7 or 8 games, who are your sort of top 3? And this might be who you've already got in your team, but who are your top 3 Arsenal guys to go with?
So it's actually not who I've already got, but so I have Jesus, Saka, and Gabriel. If I was to pick my top 3 right now, it would probably be Saka, Martinelli, and Jesus.
Okay.
I would want like the triple attack, and I would want Martinelli. I think obviously we talked about minutes risk, but those first 2 weeks are before Europe. And now that I've seen Martinelli is playing, so the injury seems to be getting better, whatever happened to him last season. The more I see him in preseason, I don't think anyone else in our team can do what Martinelli does. Off the ball, he is like just next level energy. Like just that defensive work rate is insane. Like it's what, it's that pressing that we want. And I think having spent a year learning from Jesus, his kind of national team compatriot, who's also very good at pressing. I think Pep called him the best pressing centre forward in the world before he signed. And, having Martinelli kind of be his understudy and see, oh, wow, look how hard Gabriel Jesus works off the ball. I think that's rubbed off on him, and he's become a different player. He's obviously our top goal scorer last season. I think Martinelli, this is my bold claim, you can clip this. I think he'll be Arsenal's top goal scorer this season. So I love him, and at 8 million, I think he's one to watch this year.
Cool. Excellent. We'll leave it there, mate. We'll leave it there. Thank you very much for coming on. Can you let everyone know, please, where to find you? Just remind everybody.
Yeah, of course. So I'm on Twitter at FPLNima, Nima. Obviously, like, get in touch if you want to come to any of the meetups. Obviously, we did one in Edinburgh together, and you came all the way from near Aberdeen. General came from her Glasgow. So people came from all over the country. But we're going to hold one in London on Friday, the 11th of August. Obviously, the deadline game week 1 day ahead of Fest. So anyone who's going to Fantasy Football Fest, feel free to come along from kind of midday for lunch, meet some managers in a smaller environment if you're nervous of coming on your own. And then once you've kind of met a few people, we'll all go together in convoy to Fest, and there'll be lots of kind of FPL meets going forwards. But that's kind of my last thought is, if you've not gone to watch the football with fellow FPL managers before, whatever city or country you're in, we now have about 30 people running these meets around the world. So do still get in touch. And even if you want to be the one to start for your city, and I can give you advice and help and share it to find more people in your city. But yeah, we love this game, and it's so much fun watching it together and enjoying a day out with like-minded people who can share the roller coaster of FPL, the highs and the lows.
Mate, that's absolutely perfect. I'm not going to add anything else, just to say, if you did enjoy this, make sure you hit like, hit subscribe if you want to see more. Check out Nima on Twitter. Check him out at Net That Hall, and go and check out the Arsenal Bitesize Podcast. That is the last time I'm going to promote anything Arsenal related this season, I hope. And I'll speak to you later. I'll see you at Fest, mate.
See you there, mate.
Cheers, mate.